Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about a sustainable model for developing open source decentralized networks, specifically layer 2 apps and dApps. We just heard a presentation from a company trying to build dApps, and they're running into artboarding problems, and they want their dApps to interface with any browser without having the users to deal with gas fees. So I'm going to be giving that as an example. This would be building on the work that Yoav Weiss, my CTO, has been presenting this conference on the gas station network, the 1-800 Ethereum. So we'll be using an extension of that as an example of how we could fund the development of a decentralized Infura that is an interesting use case, and it's pretty simple. So this is not what we do. This is a gift we're giving to the community. It's a template we have to come up to solve our own problem. What my company does, it's a cyber insurance platform for use cases such as crypto custody or controlling fleets of autonomous cars, anything that's very high risk. And you can afford to trade off time for security, and you're doing risk transfer to these guardians. They're posting collateral, and they're on the hook for letting anything that's not faithful to the intentions of the owner of the asset go through. But I'm not going to really talk about that, just that when we started working on bringing all of this into production, realized that there are a lot of missing pieces in the Ethereum ecosystem, and we're having to solve some of these infrastructure level issues ourselves. One of them is that there was no sane way to fund the development of a decentralized open source network, and this is what my talk is going to be about. So what's wrong with current funding models? Why do we have to fix them? So right now, we have three options. Well, the last 2 years we tried ICOs. If you want to now develop this open source system, you can try engineering it so it has some sort of unnecessary utility token in the middle. And that is first a bad economic design, because good money doesn't make for a good investment. It's conflicting interests. And it's equivalent to saying that we're going to build a world in which if you want to buy a service or a good from a startup, you have to go to a stock exchange, you have to buy that startup stock, and then you have to use that stock as the means of exchange with a startup. It doesn't make any sense. But it doesn't even make sense in terms of actually working to provide returns for investors, because after you develop the system, there's a very easy way to make a better version. That's just remove the unnecessary utility token. So the network will be forked, and there won't be a utility token, so you won't be capturing value for investors. So that doesn't work. So the other model is grants. But grants is this game that's self-extinguishing, because the generous grant providers are basically indirectly donating their wealth to the ungenerous free riders that are not participating in the granting process. And if you play this game for long enough, you end up with an ecosystem that doesn't have any generous grant providers. It only has free riders. And that gets you to the tragedy of the commons, where there are all these pieces of infrastructure we wish we had, but we don't have any way to develop them because you were using, relying on just the grant model. So we've been talking about maybe doing things with securities instead, because we've done that. We did that with the internet before, and that's how we funded innovation. But that doesn't really work for decentralized systems, or systems that want to have a path towards decentralization. And the problem is, if you're creating a financial security, it's inherently centralized around a legal entity in a particular jurisdiction, and you can't get around that. It will never pass the walk-away test. You won't be able to do what Satoshi did and say, all right, I'm done. You guys take it forward from now on. So, and the other thing that's problematic about this is, if you are creating a financial security, creating a legal entity to protect the value created for investors, you have fiduciary duties towards your investors. You have to do things like maximize shareholder value, file patents, try to protect your IP, and that doesn't align very well with the spirit of decentralized open source networks. So what are our goals? What are we trying to achieve with this new model that I'll be proposing? Well, one, we want open source to be sustainable. So all these missing pieces of infrastructure, like layer 2 networks, whether it's for storage or for private computations or fast payment systems, anything you could do on a layer 2 network, or at the level of DApp, if it's a public good, we want better models for funding it that are sustainable. Ideally, what we would want, the same type of process that happened in the mid-90s, where all this private investment went to fund all the innovation that gave us the modern internet. That could not have been done with broken funding models. The other thing it's really important for us to achieve is incentive compatibility, which is a technical term that means that we want to align the interests of various stakeholders. So we're putting the bootstrappers of the network, the people who develop the network, and then their investors in the same boat as the users of the network. Now, if we want the system to be decentralized, we also have to care about, well, what type of relationship are our investors going to have with the real world, with regulators? Will we be able to list whatever we give them? And it's important for us, because we still live in a world where the regulator has a lot of power, to have a path towards regulatory compliance. And right now, securities regulations means you can't benefit passively from the work of others if you want something to not be deemed security. Also, the ultimate test is the Hinman test, the walk-away test. Can you do what Satoshi did? Can you leave the network and it still works? Or is it centralized around the founding team? If it is centralized around the founding team, then it may make sense to ask the founding team to disclose the financials and continue to act as a central point of failure. And another thing that would be really nice as a bonus, if we managed to figure out a way to do this that didn't involve creating useless new forms of currency that we forced into the system, then we could standardize on the best form of money. We could create a network effect where all projects are using, let's say, DAI as their money, and they're using something else, another financial instrument, the same way that equity is used separately from money. Equity is something that investors use, and money is used by users to consume goods and services. So if we did that, network effects would not only improve the user experience dramatically, because you wouldn't have always to get this specific type of token and try to figure out, do price discovery on it and all these problems and pay for transaction fees. But because the underlying good money would be backed by Ether, we could drive a sustainable increase in the value of Ether. So the example I'm going to give of a problem we can solve with this model is based on an extension of Yoav's work on the 1-800 Ethereum gas stations network. And our goal is to get to the point where, the previous talk mentioned, they ran into this issue. They would like all these decentralized systems they're creating to be as accessible as centralized servers. You want any browser to be able to access any decentralized network without having to go through a crazy onboarding process, without even needing a wallet, hopefully, and certainly not having to somehow get ETH in advance to pay for gas. So the gas station network solved this problem, and we're giving that as a no strings attached gift to the community. But what we realized recently is we could use the same architecture to solve another important problem. This is a problem that's a strategic risk to the ecosystem. This is the problem of decentralizing Infura. So if we want browsers to be able to interact trustlessly, or any client, with these decentralized networks, we have to figure out a way to do that in a way that doesn't rely on a third party like Infura in the middle. And it turns out we can use the same network architecture. And I'm going to explain how that works in principle. So you have a system of relays. And the relays, they have to post a stake in order to participate in the scheme. And they also post their address where they can be contacted. This is the same as the gas station network. But instead of writing to the blockchain, what we're asking these relays to do is give us truthful information about the state of the blockchain, right? And they do that in a way that commits them to being truthful, because they're signing sort of like a pledge. This is true, what I'm giving you right now. And if they are untruthful, we will find out, because we then contact another relay in the system. and we ask them, can you please confirm that what the previous relay told me is true? And if the relay confirms, it adds its signature, it would be received like a small percentage of the subscription fee in the system, and we can continue doing that until we reach certainty. Or a relay could say, wait, I'm not adding my signature to that because it's a lie. And then we know something is up. We'd be able to penalize the relay that lied to us and take all of their stake. So we're enforcing standards of service, and we're enforcing them, we're bonding them to be truthful. And because this model, the costs would be, for running these relays, would be similar to the cost of running a VPN network, mostly bandwidth, server fees. Like you don't actually have transaction fees if you're reading from the blockchain. So it would probably make sense to run this economy of decentralized Infura in a stable coin. So your costs, your staking costs, are fixed to your server costs and bandwidth costs. And in exchange, like dApps that want to provide frictionless access to themselves, they would be subscribing to the system. They would have like a subscription fee. And then all the relays would share this subscription fee among themselves, the one that to the degree they provide service. And they would be posting a stake in DAI in order to attract customers to use their relays. But yeah, we can get this to work, but that's just like the key principle. There's a lot of work to actually get this into production and replace Infura. So how would we fund decentralized Infura? All this development needs to happen. How do we get through the bootstrapping process other than just grants or utility tokens? So we need to solve the same problem that equity solves for a corporation, but in a decentralized network. And what I'll be proposing is a no utility token model for bootstrapping layer 2 and dApps that is sustainable. So I'm going to introduce a few of the pieces. At the heart, we have decentralized equity tokens. It's like a bit of an inside joke because debt, we have a debt towards the bootstrappers of this infrastructure that we need to repay them somehow. So if you participate in the bootstrapping, you would get debt. And then you would be a debt holder. Now, what you do with the debt is you would be able to open these collateralized debt positions, this contract where you're staking debt and you get something in exchange for it. So this economy, the example economy, would be running on using DAI. We're using DAI as a staking token. But we could also play this game with credos. So these are denominated in DAI. But there are special purpose loans that are non-transferable you can only use for staking within the system. And there's a ratio of credos to DAI that's controlled by a governance mechanism. But just go through the simple flow of how this would work. So Alice is a debt holder, and she wants to participate in this game. So she stakes her debt as collateral, and she receives credos. So then she takes the credos, well, the C DAI in this case, because they're denominated in DAI, and she stakes them in the Relay Hub contract. So she registers a relay, and she posts her collateral in C DAI. Now, in exchange, if the relay does its job well, she gets a percentage of subscription fees. But if the relay doesn't do its job well, then Alice is on the hook for returning the lost funds. And if she doesn't do that, like she goes into a delinquency process, she doesn't do that, then her debt is auctioned off to the highest bidder. Now, when she wants to stop playing this game, let's say she wants to sell off her debt to a secondary market, she would maybe if she had a stock, then she returns all the credos. She gets to keep the profits. That unlocks her debt. And now she can do whatever she wants with them. So the question is, how does having decentralized equity leverage growth? Why not just wait for this system to exist and then play the game with DAI? Why would you want to participate earlier? Why would you want to be exposed to earlier risk? And the answer to that is you come in earlier, you get exposed to more risk, but in exchange, you get exposed to the growth of the network over time. So you're leveraging more than if you just came in later. This is how it works. So the critical ratio is the ratio between C DAI and DAI. So credos to DAI. Now, if it's 100%, nothing interesting happens as far as the bootstrappers are concerned because they can't play the game. But if we set the ratio of CDAI to DAI at like 90%, now if we have 1 million staked DAI in the system, we can the debt holders can receive up to 100,000 DAI as the special purpose loan. Now, as the economy grows, decentralized Infura becomes very popular. The subscription fees make it more economical to run more nodes and stake more. Then people are staking more DAI into the system. And if we even if we keep the ratio the same, we get more CDAI as loans to play the game with. So this is decentralized Infura after Credo or using Credo. Then you could just use either DAI or CDAI for the staking. And then there's this mechanism that makes sure that the debt holders are accountable for losing a CDAI, so they're playing the same game. Now, in terms of regulatory compliance, that's also important because you're not benefiting passively from the work of others. The only way you can benefit is by actually taking your fair share of risk and profit. The other maybe even more important reason we think this is going to eventually have a path toward regulatory compliance is that if you set up a system in this way, there is a future, not too far down the road, where the system doesn't have any centralization around the bootstrappers. The bootstrappers, they could all disappear. They could pull a Satoshi, and the system still works. So what are the use cases for this? Well, pretty much any layer 2 network or dApp that has staking. And we have a paper that gives a detailed example of a layer 2 network we're calling Cash Chain, which is like a Visa scale network that would use this. It would be expensive to develop. But then there's a return. So as expensive as that is, it would be worthwhile. We would have to fund that with just philanthropical grants. So all of these projects use staking. And they could all potentially use Credo and probably have a better user experience and better alignment between the interests of different participants, especially the bootstrappers and the users. So what's the current status? We have a draft of the paper explaining how Credo works. I just explained the key insight, but there are a lot of nuances to getting this to work in a way that's not vulnerable to abuse. And the paper goes into the mechanism design, the various layers of defense. We also have a simulation, a computer simulation, in NetLogo, which is an open source agent modeling system. And we are seeking comments from anyone interested, giving them access to the paper or the computational model. And we are interested in receiving feedback before we publish this officially. So if we have time, 3 questions from the crowd.
Great talk. Can you walk through the user experience of what it would look like for Gitcoin, for example, to adopt it?
Right. Well,
or
actually,
developer experience.
So you would need to change the currency of the system. Instead of having a utility token, you would say, okay, so we're doing everything. We're doing all the staking in Gitcoin. We're doing it in DAI. And then you would have this. You would inherit from a template where you can also play this game of staking, not just with DAI, but also with CDAI. Then there's this governance mechanism that determines what the ratio it is, but you could hardwire that as not at 90%, for example, right? And then you just have 2 classes. You have everybody that's participating who isn't a bootstrapper, and they just play the game with DAI, the Gitcoin game. And everybody, like the debt holders, if they want to participate in the game, they're playing the same game, but they're doing it with like a derivative. They're staking their debt, their decentralized equity tokens. They're getting this loan. Basically, we're using the mechanism of credit expansion, right? But the loan is collateralized by the debt, by the decentralized equity tokens. And yeah, I mean, from a user experience, it would just be, oh, now Gitcoin uses DAI. That would just be it. You wouldn't have to think about having a utility token, or just be transparent.
So usually, when you stake, you want to have a reward for staking. That is often implemented through inflation. But in this situation, you would need to find another way actually earn money in that process already, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the mechanism, what you get in return for staking is specific to your economy. I mean, the general case is you're taking a risk, and in exchange for taking a risk or bonding yourself to a duty to perform a service, then you are receiving transaction fees or a percentage of subscription fees, or premiums if it's an insurance platform.
Okay, got it. Here comes my second question. So you said there's this governance parameter, and you had an example of 90%. So that means that there's kind of 10% extra in circulation or something like that. Can you just play through another like percentage number and compare them in terms of risk for the investors?
Right, so it's not in circulation. The credos are non-transferable. They can't be withdrawn from the system. They can only be used to stake within the local economy. So they're not circulating. But yes, now you're playing the game. You've added another 10% worth of staking coin. Like inside this economy you've created, the credo economy, then now you have like 90 tokens. If you have 100 DAI in total, 90 of that is DAI that MakerDAO created, and 10 of those is C DAI, which you created using the credo staking mechanism. All right, thank you everybody.